Hey guys, Ed here, another episode of Pounds to Kilos for you. I'm coming to you from the gym at which I pretty much live. I'm the head coach here at Charge CrossFit. We're setting up for an in-house comp tomorrow. If you've ever done one of those, they're like the funnest day you can have at the gym, but they do take a lot of work. So I've been here doing judges sheets, scoring sheets, you name it, setting up, putting lines down, and I need a break. So I've been mulling over the last week. I didn't want to give it to you straight away because I just thought I'd take my time to think about what stood out to me. I just wanted to do a few things that we learnt, 5 in particular, from the Down Under Championships. And this is going to be specific as athlete stuff and then as broad as like where do these events sit in the grand scheme of competitive CrossFit moving forward. So this episode is just like my reflections on what was a really enjoyable weekend. I was there, I was on the floor, it was a privilege to be involved. I lost my voice horrifically. There was one pretty funny moment where I don't think I could start the heat. Like I just tried to say go and it didn't happen, which I sort of apologize for. Honestly, it's like not very professional to lose your voice if you're the MC, but I just get too goddamn excited about this sport, so I'll have to watch that in the future. Let's start off with 5 things that we learnt from the Down Under Championships. The first thing that I learnt from the Down Under Championship is that Jamie Green and Amanda Barnhart are a real threat to Tia-Clair Toomey. I think particularly Amanda Barnhart, and I don't say that because I was any less impressed by Jamie Green, but I just feel that Jamie Green's been on the scene for a while. She's challenged Tia a few times, and Tia's been able to triumph over her and everyone else. Barnhart's only challenged her a few times, in fact head-to-head competition. I don't know how many they really would have had, but she's seriously impressive, Amanda Barnhart. She's a bigger athlete and her gymnastics is not a weakness. That's the very least I can say about that. So Barnhart won the clean and jerk, and she won the run, swim, run event. So she can go long, she can go heavy. And then with the workout that started with 30 bar muscle ups, I believe she won that. And she came second in the one that started with 40 strict handstand push-ups. Or maybe it was the other way around. Either way, I don't see her having a weakness. She's a very composed competitor. She's a very balanced athlete. Like you can even just see that in her physique. Like there's no holes in her game. And she was super professional throughout the whole weekend. I see her being one of those athletes that just doesn't have a bad event at the CrossFit Games, and I don't think she'll go away from bothering Tia until like the very last day, if Tia in fact can hold her off. Jamie Green, wow, what an athlete! Like she's a small person, like, and I don't say that in a belittling way. It's just a reality. She's one of the smaller athletes. And she clean and jerked 102.5 or 105 kilos, and anything that had a load was just like, it wasn't an issue for her. Where in previous years, the smaller female athlete, you've seen them excel in the gymnastics and the conditioning, and then with the higher weightlifting stuff, that they've always had an issue. Not necessarily Jamie, but just in general at this level, she had no such issue. So I believe they are a serious threat to Tia come the 2019 CrossFit Games. Now, Courtney Haley and Alethea Boone, who are also going to the Games now, Alethea will wait for that call. Look, Courtney's certainly improved. She finished 3rd at the equivalent of the regionals, and last year she didn't finish 3rd. Is she able to challenge for a top spot at the CrossFit Games? I think she's probably a year or so away from that step. But she quietly went about her business. Keep in mind, she had already qualified for the CrossFit Games before the event had started, and then she got herself into a spot where she would have got the qualifying spot. I think all the talk was about Alethea Boone. Courtney was just Courtney all weekend. She just did what she had to do and took a really, really nice finishing position that would have got her to the CrossFit Games anyway had she not qualified. So that's the first thing I learned. Amanda Barnhart and Jamie Green, they're the real deal, no doubt about it. Second thing that I learned talking about real deals, Matt McLeod. He is the real deal. I've watched Matt's development, and I've got to say that I didn't see this coming. I knew that he was doing great things, and I knew he was a super competitive regionals athlete. And I actually, even though I don't have the proof of this, once Royce Dunn had pulled out, him and Tom Lengel were the 2 characters that I thought potentially might take the qualifying spot. I'm still finding it hard to, or I can still say that it's unexpected, because he dominated. He absolutely dominated. He took 2 firsts and 2 seconds in a 7 event, or there's 7 events in the Down Under Championship, so he was first or second in 4 of them. That's just crazy. We haven't really seen that. I can't recall a regionals athlete that's done something like that, apart from the Kia, that's the car I drive, Tia Kara battle that we've seen over the years. So where did Matt, like in the end, he actually didn't hold off Hepner by that many points. So his weaknesses, the clean and jerk, I wouldn't call it a weakness, but he didn't place particularly well there. And he didn't have a good event 5 on, event 6, which was the first event of day number 3. I'm not entirely sure exactly why that was the case. That was the sandbag handstand walk. I thought he did quite well in it, but he actually took 40th place. I just think that event was so short that it was like a bit of a log jam, and I don't necessarily think he's bad at either of those things. It just wasn't a great performance from him as such. So why is McLeod the real deal? This is why. He doesn't have any superpowers as such. So at the games, he doesn't actually need anything to pop up to do that well. Like he's not the athlete that's like, oh, if there's lots of gymnastics, he'll do well, or if there's a swim event, he'll do well. He'll do well whatever comes up. He's a serious threat for like a top 20, top 10 finish. Like some of you might be rolling your eyes at that, but we saw Dean Linda-Layton go 15th last year in his opening games debut, and I've got to say that I was more impressed with Matt's performance this year than I was with Dean's at regionals last year. That's to take nothing away from Dean. So yeah, that's the second thing I learned. Look out for Matt McLeod. I'm really stoked for him. By the way, he was on the train that I caught up to regionals. Like the winner of the Down Under Championship caught the train up there. So he's an environmentally friendly dude as well. I like that. The third thing that I learned is that Project X and the X Terminators can certainly make big waves at the games. It was an interesting battle all weekend. It played out sort of how I thought it was. They didn't make it any less exciting, but they kept going 1-2, except for the very first event, which was the clean and jerk. The females for Project X didn't put up as big a numbers as X Terminators, and there was a little bit of a gap. In the end, that sort of proved to be the difference, realistically. I believe Project X finished 12th in that event, so that's Jess and Harriet, who are excellent lifters, but the standard is just so high now that you actually have to make sure that like both of those lifters can lift in excess, if not like 100 kilos. X Terminators had Kate Gordon, who put up 110 or thereabouts, maybe a little bit more, 111. So look, I believe from what I saw, from where I was standing, I think Project X right now are the better prepared team. I say that because just as the weekend went on, after that first event, Project X slowly but surely clawed their way back into the competition. And after the very first event, Project X, they actually took more points than the X Terminators. But that doesn't mean, especially now the X Terminators roster is locked in, that they won't find that synergy as a team. I spoke, if you watch the Rob Forte interview, you know that they hadn't trained much as a team. So they just got by on just sort of like being very experienced athletes. And they've also all had a bit of team experience, except for Maddie. Project X, to me, they looked pretty sharp. I was really impressed. I was more impressed than I thought I would be, and I don't take their second place here as a signal that they're not going to be dangerous at the games. I think they're going to be really, really good at the games, and I think that the Asia Championships gave them a bit of a boot up the backside in terms of getting, there wasn't the performance that they wanted. So that's good for any team, I think, to get that before the big dance, which is the CrossFit Games. And then I reckon losing to the X Terminators, I'd have to speak to the individuals, but I reckon that'll set a fire in them to really prove themselves. I reckon their ultimate goal is to be the highest finishing Australian team at the CrossFit Games, and within that, obviously, to potentially win the CrossFit Games as well. I was just really impressed. I just thought that all 4 of them handled themselves really well. The X Terminators, Rob and Kate, staying in. They're impressive characters. I've interviewed them both. the two coming in, Zeke, I like Zeke a lot. I love what he's done with his development as an athlete. Danny Horan, I must say I don't know much about. But I believe both teams are going to be very, very good at the CrossFit Games. A few other teams that I was impressed with was Renegade Z and 6 for Army. They were excellent, as was Star Strength. 1-2-1 for me had the best teamwork. That was very evident on the worm in the squat clean thrusters. They were doing that more efficiently than anyone. They just looked so practiced. I mean, 3 of them in the same family, for God's sake, so it's not surprising. But I think if Project X and X Terminators can map over the teamwork that I saw from 1-2-1 and the communication there, that's just maybe what they're lacking a tiny bit. But I'm standing a decent way away, so it's very hard to see that. But that would be my assessment of it. Either way, I think that both teams are going to be huge threats at the games. And I love the competition of the games, but I want to see one of those teams win. I really want to see one of those teams win. So let's see how it goes. There's some mighty teams in there, but that's the third thing I learned about the CrossFit, about the Down Under Championships. Those 2 teams are legit for the CrossFit Games. Okay, what's the fourth thing that I learned from the Down Under Championships? We have got an exciting decade of competition coming up. I say that just because of the injection of youth into the competition was just so awesome to watch. Not just the people that finished towards the top, but just how many new competitors there were. I'm going to name 3 that really struck me over the weekend. The first one is the 16-year-old who competed for the females, Sarah Plumpton. It was so cool to see her next to Vicky Weber. Vicky Weber is one of the more senior athletes on the roster, and having those 2 compete next to each other was just awesome. So Sarah's 16. I think she took the heat of, I can't remember what event it was, but I was calling it, and I just thought to myself, I'm going to be potentially commentating this girl for the next 15 years, and the only reason that won't happen is not because she's going to stay in this, it's because I'll get fired. So it was just awesome to watch her compete, and I look forward to her and many others like her progressing through the competition. The 2 on the men's side that took me were obviously Luke De Jong and Jay Crouch. I feel that we could watch those 2 battle it out for the next decade, like I said. For me, this is like the Judd versus Ablett debate. I feel like those 2 are going to be the elites of our sport moving forward in the next sort of... I believe Jay will take the step next year. I think he'll get to the CrossFit Games, and Luke could be right there with him, but you can't sort of have 2, I guess, at once, maybe not. Anyway, the point being is I reckon we're looking at a battle royale between those 2. Jay Crouch is just so composed. It's kind of scary that someone at that age looks that comfortable out on the floor, but unsurprising being coached by Rob Forte. And Luke De Jong, he just looks like he was working out in his garage, and he just accidentally walked into the stadium and then started working out and beating everyone. It was cool to see him take an event. He's a quiet guy. I always like the quiet competitors, silent assassin, if you will. And he's got some deficiencies, but none that can't be worked on. He struggled with the strict handstand push-ups in particular. That's just a thing you have to get better at. Hey, we've all got them, and even though he's an elite, he's got one too. So his progression over the next few years, I'm really looking forward to. But for me, it was pretty special to see some old school competitors that I've called a number of times, like your Vicky Webbers, like your CJ Walkers, go up against people like Jay Crouch, like Sarah Plumpton, and for them to have a really great tussle. This is our sport. This is the future of our sport, the future and the past at the same time. Acknowledging the past whilst getting excited about the future. It was a good weekend on that front. Okay, the 5th thing that I learned from the Down Under Championships is CrossFit is here to stay. I mean, you already knew that anyway, but competitive CrossFit is going nowhere. For those that attended the event, they would all agree that it was a raging success. Here's the reality. We didn't have the same amount of spectators that we would have at the regionals from 2 years ago when it was in Wollongong. I'm not going to compare it to last year because that was at Kudos Bank Arena. It's kind of a different thing. But just remember that there's been a lot of change to this competition season, and rightly or wrongly, the fact that the word regional was removed definitely turned some people off. I expect those people to return. We didn't have a number of big names that have been features of regionals from previous years, Cara Saunders and Tia Claire Toomey being the two obvious ones. But I'll tell you what, if you were there, you'd agree that Amanda Barnhart and Jamie Green did just the right amount to make up for those absences of Toomey and Saunders. The vendors that were there, I loved the attitude of them. Like, all of them, I think, probably knew that the crowd wasn't as big, but they all knew that they had to get behind this event and support it, and that this was something that, like, the community at large needs to really stick fat through. I'm telling you this, you want to be on the positive side of this in 2 or 3 years when you see that it's working out. You don't want to be known for being the naysayer or I didn't go to it for a few years because I thought it would be bad, and now you're coming back when it's popular again. It's already popular, but this event next year is going to be even better. The planning that goes into it is just outrageous. Mick Shaw and his team, Lindsley Merrick, I just can't tell you guys, I get to see behind the scenes. There's some really good people doing all the right things for all the right people for all the right reasons. That's a Coach Glassman quote. And this is still CrossFit. It's a CrossFit sanctioned event. It's not a CrossFit regional, but this is still CrossFit. And we're not going anywhere. And that event's going to get bigger and bolder. There's more sanctionals on next year. If you're not on board with the changes, then get on board with them. If you are on board with them, then get excited, because our sport is growing, and you didn't need any more evidence of it at the Down Under Championships. Just before I sign off, I thank I just said well done and acknowledge the event crew, and the volunteers should be acknowledged as them. You know who else should be acknowledged is the athletes. Geez, they are the most pleasant bunch of athletes that you could imagine from a sport. I know our sport is sort of not professional yet, sort of semi-pro. There's some prize money, but there's not money for just partaking, if you will. It's just an absolute pleasure to have athletes coming up to you and saying, hey, thanks for the job you've done on the weekend. And I got that myself a few times. I know other staff members and volunteers got it as well. In all the posts that are done on social media, athletes are always thanking people who put it on. That to me is what makes our sport so great, and it's what sets us aside, amongst other things, from other professional sports, where if somebody wins something in another sport, like, you get these huge long posts about thanking their family and stuff like that, but they rarely thank the event organisers and things like that. So my hat's off to the athletes and the way they conduct themselves. I don't have a bad word to say about any of the athletes. It was just such an enjoyable weekend to be a part of. That's it from me. These are the things I learned from the Down Under Championship. Like I said, I'm sorry this is a bit late. It was intentional because I didn't want to just film this only a day or two after leaving, when all this stuff was in my head, and I was tired as all hell, by the way. But now that I've sat back and been able to think about the event in relation to other events that I've been to, namely the 6 or 7 regionals, I just really wanted to share my thoughts, and I hope you feel the same way. Let's see those Aussies and New Zealanders kick some ass at the CrossFit Games. Keep converting pounds to kilos. I'll get back to setting up this event. See ya.